So today I'm going to go over briefly the installation of the fuel pump module for the F150. We start with a fuel tank we've got here out of one of the models. We have it cut apart so we can show you inside. And when you start the installation, this is the factory fuel pump module that you're going to extract out of the top according to the service manual. And then when you're done with it, we need to extract two things out of it, and I've already taken them out, and you should know how to do that yourself. But we need to get the rollover valve, and we need to get the level sender off of it, because we're going to install these on our fuel pump module before we put it back in the tank. This is our fuel pump module that we're going to be replacing with. This is the 2-pump variant. We also have a 3-pump variant, and we're going to put the level sender back on here, and we're going to put the rollover valve back in. Now, I'm not going to connect the wires just because I don't want to. I like to leave our factory stuff in its factory condition, so for when we have training, we have questions about how it came from the factory, we don't have it all hacked up. But the way it installs on is very, very simple. It just slides in place like the factory one does and locks in. You're going to reconnect the wires with the supplied butt splices, and you're going to crimp them on. Next thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to put the rollover valve in. As you can see here, I've already taken it out of the factory pump module. And I've loosened up the screws on our brackets we have here. Make sure you put a little bit of petroleum jelly on the O-ring before you put it in, because we don't want to roll the O-ring or tear it. There's no orientation in terms of 180 degrees, but we do have to make sure these tabs here kind of line up with the brackets. And when it's loose, you can just take it and click it into place, and then make sure the brackets kind of grab over those little ramped notches there. And then all you have to do at that point is just to tighten back up the screws here, and you go from there. Now that I've got the level sender attached and I've got the factory rollover valve installed, I can go ahead and I can drop the whole assembly down into the tank. The triple works the same way. You don't have to take anything apart. It goes all inside the tank in one shot. In this case here, I've shown you, I've got the factory fuel line here, which you don't need anymore. You can just get it out of your way, but I'm just going to leave it there for sake of maintaining the integrity of the fuel tank, so we can use it for training purposes later on. And then the evap and tank vent lines. And then there's also a drain line that comes from the filler neck that's not shown here because it's going to stay with the truck when you drop the tank down. The only thing you have to watch for is the locator tab here. It has to line up with the locator indicator on the top of the fuel tank. I'm not showing the O-ring on the tank here just for simplicity purposes, but make sure you don't forget the O-ring or you're going to have leak issues. So before you drop in the tank, we need to get a hold of this one line inside the tank here that I'm showing you, and we need to get hold of that before you drop the assembly in the tank. So I'm going to reach in there and grab this and pull it out of the way before I feed in the level sender arm first. And then what I'm going to do is, if you see, there's a little hole here on what we call a spine, right, where the feed and the return passages go on either side of it. We need to make sure that this connector goes inside of this pocket that we may have machined out. So the way you get hold of this guy first, and then feed the level sender float arm in next. Don't put any load on it. And then feed it into the tank. And then you can put this connector through the opening in the spine, and then we can click it into place like this. Okay? And then you can just slowly lower it into position like such. Now, the next step is the lock ring. And before you do the lock ring, it's easiest to go ahead and unscrew these two connectors and just set them aside. And in some cases, it's easiest also to unscrew the feed fitting, or sorry, this is a return fitting, and orient the feed fitting so it doesn't get damaged. And then you have the lock ring that goes over like such. And that was real easy because the O-ring isn't there. And like I said, I just had the O-ring there for purposes of the demonstration. And then when you're done, you can tighten down and orient the feed connector as such, go all the way till it tightens up, and you can back it up to one turn, and then you have to turn down the lock nut to jam it in place. Then you can do the same thing with the return fitting, all the way till it stops. Then you can back it out up to one turn until you're happy with it. Then you can tighten up the jam nut here until it's locked into position. Then you can come back and put on your fitting for your return line. One of the things I wanted to mention here is a pitfall when you do the installation if you don't deconflict the wires for the pump, they can possibly obstruct the float arm on the level cylinder. Now these wires are for the level cylinder, they normally be tied up here, but just say for instance you had one of these just totally out of control out here, you could see how it could prevent the float arm or obstruct it or prevent it from freely moving up and down, which would be a problem. So make sure when you put this in the tank that these pump wires and the level cylinder wires are around the back and they kind of stay in place once they're there. Another thing worth mentioning when you go to uninstall this is we have this little connector here for the tank vent, and it has two buttons on it, one on each side, and it looks like, based on how we built it, that the rollover valve prevents you from reaching the button that's adjacent to it. And that's okay because you only need to push one button to release it. And I'll demonstrate here. Of course, when you do this, you're going to be doing it from above the tank. But I'll just show you. I'm going to just press the button on one side, and then this little connector just comes right down like that. So you don't need to be able to get your finger on both sides. Just wanted to point that out. And that completes the installation.